Hello, my name is Natalie Appel, and today I will be talking about weather forecast technology and its impact on farming communities. So, the weather. It's one of the biggest things in our world, yet it is one of the few things that mankind still has not found a way to control. With the science and technology of today, we at least have found a way of predicting it most of the time. But today, a lot of weather forecasts aren't really anything special. We have it in our pockets in our phones, and we're able to see it really easily with a touch of a button. And that really is possible through things that are called ICTs. Now, what is an ICT? An ICT is an information communication technology. And this can stand for a lot of things, but essentially it means that it is a technology that allows for information to be spread. Obvious examples: phones, TVs, radio, the internet, all very good examples that with the infrastructure of the satellites and systems that we have in place today give lots of people around the world access to a lot of information. And weather forecasts factor into that technology. For us, when we see a weather forecast, maybe we'll decide, let's not go to the beach if it's raining. But for other people, this type of information and the access to it can greatly impact their lives. And one particular group that this impact can have is on farmers. Now, farmers, this group as a whole is a real underpinning structure of society. Without food, we would not be able to do anything. And the global warming and other factors has made their already very unpredictable job and industry even more so. And now I would like to just state that farming cultures do vary greatly across the globe. So I will only be looking at one specific area. And that particular region that I will be focusing on is sub Saharan Africa. Now, sub Saharan Africa, again, I would like to establish is quite a big region, but from the studies that I was able to examine in areas like Botswana, Ghana, Tanzania, and a few more, this is just providing a snapshot of some of the things that these farmers are experiencing in this region. So to provide some context, there are many large rural populations within this region, and many of them are very reliant on agricultural industries, but have been seeing a lot of more widespread poverty and extensive low agricultural productivity due to low resources, weak markets, and just the rising instability in the climate. This climate has change has also impacted rainfall, which is a very important factor in farming in these areas. Many farms of this area rely on rainfall. It makes up about 50% of this region's water and what it goes towards. But and because of that, it is very much needed for maintaining the crops and livestock. Even those few who have access to irrigation systems, which are really only about 1% of the population, still are relying on rainfall to fill their reservoirs. So, this concept of rainfall and climate change has already turned these farming regions' risky enterprise into something that returns even lower returns. And it is for these reasons that researchers and universities around these and various parts of these areas have found that access to climate forecasts through things like ICTs can help develop a lot of predictability, and that predictability can help build an economic sustainability within the agricultural sector. And that could potentially go on to have repercussions in a good way for the rest of the economic systems of these countries as a whole. Now, when it comes to ICTs and weather forecasts, it would be great if everything was perfect. But unfortunately, as many of us know, when we look at the weather, it is not. So, one of the big problems that comes from these systems is a bit of an ideological divide between urban versus rural. So, where are these technology and forecasts being developed? Usually by urban populations. And these are the populations who do not need this system as much as others do. So, a lot of times this can result in broadcasts being much too broad or not being delivered in time in a timely manner, as a lot of farmers need at least 1 month, usually more, warning to even be able to change any of their planting season plans. And because of this, there is just a lack of knowledge of what farmers need from this technology. In addition to this, the method of which farmers learn the forecasts can also be a big problem. Again, most of us, or a lot, do have phones in our pocket. We can easily check the weather. But for people and farmers in these rural areas, that is not so. a lot of ways that they are able to learn this information is through ICTs like TV and radio and phones. There has been a lot more rise in phone usage over the years. A study in Tanzania found a great increase over the past decade, but it is still not completely widespread, and it can be incredibly costly to these people. And a lot of times the cost is not worth the potential risks involved, because as we know, a lot of times the weather is not predictable. And for us, again, maybe we just don't go out. For farmers, they could potentially lose their entire crop. And if that crop is lost, that means their family does not eat. And not just their family, depending on where these communities work, some communities are very reliant on their local farmers, which means that if farmers are given inaccurate data and their crops suffer, that could lead to an entire community suffering as well, and could lead to a lot of repercussions. In addition to this, even if they were told it's going to be the perfect forecast and it was 100% accurate, a lot of farmers do not have access to the labor, resources, funds, seeds, fertilizer, everything that they need to actually make a bumper crop. And so because of that, it is just a lot of potential that is being wasted. Now, what can change? Well, one of the main things that I have mentioned is this divide of who needs the technology and who is actually developing it. So, the biggest thing that can be done is get the people who need it and get them working to help develop it. Get the farmers involved. Get them involved in the technology, because right now there is not there the use of this technology is not at the peak that it could be. In addition to that, just when we think of modernization, we often think of what is the newest technology, the data, what's the newest system, what can we develop? But sometimes we need to take a step back. We need to think about where we have come from in our past, and don't see modernization as the only solution. And a university in Botswana found very interestingly that a lot of regions have been turning back to their traditional farming practices of ways of reading the land, of the animals, of looking into their history and pulling their planting season from that. And what they actually found is that they sometimes would do better than with the scientific data that had been provided. They were more accurate with their traditional practices. But what was even more interesting was that these studies found that even though the traditional practices and the data and scientific methods both had their pros and cons, it was when they worked together in conjunction that saw the best results for those farmers. This could also go a long way to building that trust with the data, with the scientific groups, and to bridging that divide so that there is more of a use of this technology in a more widespread range. And with all of this in thinking in mind, there has to be a relief of pressure on the farmers. Right now, it is the farmers who are being asked to pay for so many things. They don't have the support. So the government needs to take a step up. They need to provide subsidies, support systems to be able to give farmers what they need to actually build a big growing industry and let the country grow itself. Well, a lot of times, unfortunately, when development happens, it can sometimes come from other countries like Canada, like the US, like Europe, coming into different areas and helping. And while that can in some ways help, we need to be able to think of letting certain areas work for themselves and learn how to grow their own industry so they are no longer reliant on outside help. Now, with all that in mind comes what's going to happen in the future. So while there has been some steps forward, there has unfortunately also been steps back. In some regions in sub-Saharan Africa, there has been a lot of land reforms, of deregulation of agricultural boards, the reduction of subsidies to farmers in a time that it is very much needed. And a lot of agricultural communities have had to find alternative ways to support themselves because they just cannot make it their livelihoods anymore. So we need to think about how that can be changed. The use of ICTs, of weather forecasts, can help with that, but it is just one factor of the whole system that makes up farming. It can help with that development, it can help grow the industry, but it is not the only thing. There is lots of potential, and it would be interesting to see where this potential goes in the future. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed.